What's going on, you guys? It's Ginger on Wheels here. Today we're going to be doing a video talking about and comparing the Wolf King GTR and the InMotion RS Hyper scooters. These are both extremely fast, 55, 60 mile an hour scooters, but they've got some pretty stark differences between the two. And I get a lot of questions all the time, which one should I buy? So let's go ahead and cover them both and then hopefully make your shopping experience a little bit easier. Okay, for starters, these are both 72 volt scooters. They both have 2000 watt motors. They both go around 55 or 60 miles an hour, at least with me on them. I'm 6'1½", about 240 pounds. This one does have a slightly larger battery at 40 amp hours. This one has a 35 amp hour battery now. When it originally came out, it was 33 and change, but I think they use different cells now and it's 35. When you hop on the two scooters, the most obvious difference right away is gonna be the ride height on the GTR. This thing sits much taller off the ground, although you can adjust the suspension on the InMotion RS to be around the same height, although the suspension is not nearly as squishy and plush as it is on the GTR. The other thing you're going to notice right away is the throttle design. This one has the finger trigger throttle, which in my experience is a little better for off-roading. This one has a quarter twist throttle, so you just twist this piece here to get the motors to activate. They both have TFT displays. This is the Wolf GTR display. It's a little smaller and a little harder to see. The RS display though, much bigger, more bright, but it doesn't show as detailed of specs. Like for battery, you just get 5 bars. So for adjusting the settings on the GTR, this scooter does not have an app, but you can adjust all the settings in here. You can adjust the strength and the braking and all the acceleration modes. You can adjust cruise control features and whatnot, just from the display using these buttons here. The InMotion RS does have an app. You download the InMotion app on your phone. Might be a smart idea to get a phone holder. It's got a smart BMS inside of here for monitoring battery temperatures and cell group voltages and things like that. You can also adjust all the settings within the app. So this thing does have a little less functionality out of the box, but it has an app you can use. So for some people that might be good, for others not as good, but you can adjust nitty-gritty details in both of them pretty easily. Up here in the cockpit, this is our power button for the RS. You just hold this to get it to turn on, and the plus and minus buttons here are for going through the 4 speed modes. You got a little dial over on the left side too. This has your turn signals, your headlights, your horn, and then this is a mode button that you can use to switch drives of the motor. You can choose dual motor and single motor, and you can choose if you want it to be single from the rear or single from the front, just by pushing and pressing this middle button here. And when you're moving, you can press and hold this middle button if you have the cruise control feature turned on in the app, and cruise control will activate. So I really like the cruise control on this thing. You're just cruising at like 30, hold the cruise control button and it'll lock on your speed for you, and you don't have to mess with the quarter twist throttle over here anymore. This little thingy though on the RS has been replaced on the GTR with this little thingy right here from Kaabo. This is our power button right here, and then power up and power down. It's also got 4 modes plus a sport mode. The sport mode does have a turbo function which pushes out 10 more amps. So with me riding in the turbo mode, this scooter is actually faster, and the acceleration is brutal off the line, like much faster than the RS. But to get into the turbo mode, you click this button until you're in speed mode. It'll go 4, 5, and then you'll see the S right here. So that's when you're in sport mode. And when you're going full throttle in sport mode, you can double tap the throttle again and it will get going even faster. It's out of this world. It's crazy fast. And then over here, just like the RS, we've got our lights, horn, and turn signal switches, but this one lights up when you push it. I like that, so you can just glance down and see if it's turned on. When you push the turn signals on the RS, you'll get a little blinking arrow on the display, but it's much harder to see than that green LED on the GTR. Another function that the GTR has that the RS does not is traction control, and it's a huge game changer for off-road riding. In speed modes 1 through 4, when you're just cruising around off-road, this thing will, you see it right there, it says ESP, that's electronic skid protection. It'll modulate the power to the front tire so that you're not spinning out the front tire when you floor it, and the rear tire will have full power. So if it can sense that the tires are not moving at the same RPM, it'll lower the power to the front tire, and it helps you gain traction off-road and up hills and stuff. So you can have this thing in speed mode 4 and floor it up a hill, and it's not going to burn out the tires. Where this one, it'll definitely burn out the tire. It's got a little bit of traction control, but it doesn't really work that well. And it's got street tires that are much more slick. The tires on the RS are 11-inch tubeless street tires, and the tires on the GTR are 12-inch hybrid tubeless tires. You can see that we've got a little bit of a grippy design here. This works really well off-road and on-road. It's a good hybrid tire. It makes a little bit of noise, but it's not out of this world crazy. Like if you ride with the off-road knobbies that some of the scooters come with, it sounds like a freaking chainsaw coming down the street. As far as maintenance abilities, I think the RS wins just slightly though. I like that the controller compartment is in here for the GTR. You can just pop off this back box here and you can see and make sure all your connections are tight, or you can pop in and out the 2-in-1 controller. For the RS though, you kind of got to take it apart a little bit. You have to take off these stickers, and then you're popping off side pieces. There's one on each corner. You have to take off a bunch of screws underneath this mat that you're gonna have to glue back down. It's not the greatest. This one also does have quick disconnect for the motors. You can just unscrew this little thing right here, undo your 2 lug nuts, and pull the motor off if you want to replace the tire. It's a lot easier to have it not physically attached to the scooter like a ball and chain. The GTR, as you can see, there's no quick disconnect. So you can take the 2 lug nuts off, but your motor, your tire is still physically attached to the controller. So you have to take the controller apart and unattach the motor wires, or just do your tire change right next to the scooter. It can be kind of a pain. The acceleration curve on the GTR is pretty brutal out of the box. Like, even if in speed mode 2 dual motor, you're really going to be finessing the throttle to make sure it's not going to overpower and just go way faster than you're expecting it to. On the InMotion RS though, and you can adjust the powers to the front and rear motor in the app and everything. On the InMotion RS, it's much smoother. When you hit the throttle, the scooter will kind of ramp into speed. So it's not going to brutally peel out the front and rear tires unless you're in speed mode 4, or X mode as it's called in the earlier versions of the RS. Don't get me wrong though, they're both hellaciously fast scooters. This is just, in the world of hyper scooters, this one accelerates a little smoother than this one does. All right, so as far as charging on both of these scooters, they do come each with one 5-amp aluminum framed stock charger, and they both have proprietary type charging ports. This one looks like this, and you've got one port here on the battery and one port here on the battery, but this battery is removable, keep that in mind. So you can plug one of those chargers into each port, and you can bring the battery inside or into a more acclimated area to charge it. The RS charges where you park. It's got one little cover flap right here with 2 very small little charging ports. See if I can get a video of that. And it has this little tiny plug right here. As far as I know, this thing doesn't have a name. I've never seen this type of charger on another gadget before. There's 2 types of RSs though. The yellow InMotion RS from eWheels, I think, has the GX20-3 chargers. This one from Vora Motors, this is the midnight version. It has this little plastic port charger right here. So if you want to plug 2 chargers into this thing, you got to buy another one of these chargers. It comes with one, and I think they're like 150 bucks each. But you can charge it at 10 amps. You just plug one into each of the ports. And on the GTR, you would have to do the same thing. The chargers aren't quite as expensive though. And another thing you can do is order aftermarket chargers like this one. This was one I sell at pevoutlet.com. It's just an 84 volt charger, and this one is almost 10 amps. This is a standard GX16-3 scooter charger right here, and you can buy these little splitters on pevoutlet.com. And for the GTR, you can also buy these little adapters. I got these ones on AliExpress. And you can plug these into standard GX16-3 chargers, and then they have the little plug on the end for the GTR. And you can charge the scooter with both ports at almost 10 amps using this one charger. It's got plastic housing, so it's not quite as durable, but it is much lighter. If you want to carry this thing in your backpack, you can fast charge on the go. They don't make such an adapter for the RS, so if you want to fast charge the RS, it does have a bigger battery, so you'll get more range out of it, but you're gonna have to drop another 150 bucks for another stock charger and then carry both of them with you. With the GTR, I like that you have options, so. Even though it does have a smaller battery, it can be easier to manage when you're doing long trips. When you're inflating the tires on the GTR, these are the 12-inch tires here, it does have this typical Schrader valve that you see on most bicycles, and you can use these quick release type adapters to just plug it right into the tire and it goes psh, and then you're plugged in. This is the electric pump that I sell at pevoutlet.com. With the InMotion RS, the valve doesn't stick nearly far enough out of the rim, so you can't use those quick disconnect pieces. What you have to do is you have to unscrew the quick release connector, and then on these electric pumps it has this little piece right here, and you just screw it into the tire. So you're probably not going to be able to inflate the tires with the standard bike pump. Just keep that in mind. When you fold the GTR scooter, a really hard folding mechanism, you might need 2 people even to undo it. At least you can latch it. It's got this latch right here, and it clips into this piece of the deck, so you can pick the scooter up as one unit and haul it around or put it in the back of your truck. With the InMotion RS, you fold the bars down and there's nothing holding them back here, so you kind of have to pick the scooter up by the body even with the bars in the way. And they're both over 100 pounds. They're both not easy to get in and out of doors or up and down stairs or even in your car. The bars are both about the same width. They both have front and rear hydraulic brakes, although the hydraulic brakes on this RS do feel a little better. And as you can see, they have some sort of reservoir here. So they're different brakes for sure. They both have 160 millimeter rotors. They have very good stopping power, both of them, honestly, in my experience. And as for the batteries, this one, like I said, has the 40 amp hour 72 volt battery. This one is 35 amp hour, but it is removable. You can move this little thingy right here and you can just pop the battery out of the deck, which is really nice. If you have to store this thing in the winter, temperature, you can take the battery in the house and leave it somewhere more climate controlled, and you can leave the scooter like out in your shed or your garage, because you don't want these things to get below freezing temperature. If you have to leave your scooter in an unsecured location, you can take the battery with you, or you can just leave the scooter in your garage and take the battery inside to charge. The grips, I personally like the grips on the GTR more, the stock ones anyway. They have this palm flare out and it makes it a lot easier to grab and handle when you're doing extreme riding. The grips on this one, they're a little wider, but they're just flat and there's really no actual grip part. As far as the handlebar design, you can see they both have this dual stem design, which a lot of people really prefer, and it just makes the scooter look more robust. The difference between these two bars though, GTR bars are shorter. This is more of an off-road scooter. The RS bars are much taller, but the bars on this scooter are adjustable. You can loosen these 4 screws here and you can move the bars up and down within these brackets, and you can adjust the bar height. We also do have a longer and wider deck on the InMotion RS. This one gives you a lot more real estate to plant your feet. This one, it's more narrow and it's a lot taller off the ground, like I said, but I like the footrest on this one more too. This one works, but it's not sloped up very much. You can't really triangulate yourself in the scooter as well to mount yourself if you're going over extreme bumps. The folding mechanism on the Wolf, this is the same folding mechanism design that they've had since the Wolf Warrior 11 Plus, and it's really hard to do by yourself, I'm not gonna lie. You flip this little switch up, you pull this out, and there's a little barrel nut mechanism you have to dink with to get it to fold, and then when you do, these bars come down and they're very heavy. On the InMotion RS though, you just unscrew this little bolt right here, you pop this thing down, and then the bars fold down. It operates on a little swivel right here. It's much more straightforward, much easier to use. I much prefer this folding mechanism. They both seem to have the same amount of sturdiness. There's no wiggle or play in either of the folding mechanisms. This one's just all around easier to use. You'll notice this box right here on the GTR, and this is actually where the controllers are. This is a water sealed box. It's really hard to get any dust or debris in there, but the controllers are separate from the battery, and this little box gets a lot of wind and air as you're moving, so that helps cool down the controllers. And on the RS, the controllers are actually inside the deck here with the battery. There's one controller in the front and one controller in the back. It does still have this box here, which houses the horn assembly and also I think the DC step down converter for all the lights and turn signals and switches and things. Speaking of lights, these are the lights on the GTR. They're the same lights that were on the Wolf Warrior 11 Plus, the Wolf King, the Wolf King GT Pro. This light assembly is boss. They're really bright. They have a pretty narrow throw though, but they're just insanely bright. You can get away with riding at night with just these lights, but I do like to have my fire lights on top. I've got one here, and then the LED bar in the front. You can grab those at pevoutlet.com if you want them. I really like riding with those. If you have all of them on, you're basically just like Terminator rolling down the street. You can do the same thing on the RS, but I hardly ride this one at night, so I don't really have it all set up like that. But the stock headlight on the RS looks about the same to the naked eye, but it is not the same at all. It's a very narrow throw. The lights are much weaker. I have a hard time riding with just this light. All right, I brought the scooters in the house so I could show you the lights without having to try to explain it. So you push the lights button here, you get the LED that tells you that they're on. You've got the extremely bright front headlights. You've got 2 runner lights, one on each side of the deck here. These cool blue lights come on. You cannot turn those off. It's got really dim tail lights because the covers are tinted. With the turn signal, again, you get a little light that shows you the turn signal's on. You get the blinky yellow across here, and you get the turn signal right here. They're pretty hard to see, but I guess you get some glowing on the ground. They're not extremely bright though at night, keep that in mind. It's also kind of cool that when you push the brakes, the blue lights turn to red, but it mixes the red with the blue, so it kind of makes pink. Not a huge fan of that, but it is what it is. The only thing that really impresses me about the light setup on this thing is the headlight. Okay, the headlight situation on the InMotion RS, as I said, this display is much brighter. When we turn the lights on, you get the headlights. They're not quite as bright as the GTR, but they're still very functional. They're much more pinpointed. They're not as wide of a throw. And I really like this whole ordeal back here. You get these insanely bright lights on either side, and you also get this LED bar. And when you pull the brakes, the LED bar goes even brighter. When you turn the turn signal on, you get flashes right here, and then it also flashes from this piece right here on the front of the handlebars. It's timed for like 10 seconds, so you don't have to push it again when you want it to turn off. On the GTR, it will stay on as long as that button is depressed. Even though that thing does have the side runner lights, it's really hard to compete with these lights in the back. These things are hellaciously bright, and then this thing gets even brighter when you pull the brakes, so I think this thing wins on visibility. If you want to be super bright though, just get the Firelight Trifecta setup from pevoutlet.com. Can't go wrong with that thing on any scooter. I think it's also worth mentioning too, on the GTR, if you push it, you get a high mode. If you push it again, you get a low mode. And then if you push it again, a third time, you get strobe. And this thing, I mean, try and compete with that at night. It's like straight up seizure mode. The fender situation, the Wolf has always had a problem with this. These fenders hardly do anything at all. Like when the tire's spinning really fast, it's flicking debris off the front as you ride. and it all blows back onto the front of the scooter, and it gets all over the headlights and the control box and just makes everything messy. It's not long enough to really prevent mud from coming up under here, so the fenders just have never been great on the Wolf. You can buy aftermarket fenders on like AliExpress that I've seen that cover just like that portion of the tire, and that's really nice. I just don't have those put on. And the rear fender, as you can see, it's really far off the tire. It sort of has to be because the suspension is up under here and the tire will go up into there, but it doesn't cover the tire far enough out the back to prevent water from, when the tires are moving, water is going to spray back like this and just get all over the back, so you get soggy butt when you're riding. This is just a really hardcore like mudding off-road scooter for sure. The fenders on the RS, however, you can see this is like a two-part design. It's got one fender that goes right here and then one that you screw onto the lug nuts for the wheel, and it extends it down all the way down to here. So you can ride this thing in the rain, and this, you can see the suspension's still nice and shiny clean. It's a much better fender in the back. The fender in the front is pretty good too. It goes back really far, keeps the suspension clean. I just wish it went a little farther forward so that water doesn't spray on the front. You can see this is kind of muddy. That's from water coming off the front of the tire and then blowing back onto the scooter. This one would be really muddy, but I did a video where I rode it literally underwater, so it cleaned a lot of the mud off. That's one thing I should mention. This thing is borderline waterproof. Like, you can ride it in torrential downpours without having any issues. It's IPX6 water resistant for the body of the scooter and all the components, and IPX7 for the battery. So the battery compartment is almost fully submergible. Almost being the operative word there. The GTR boasts a pretty high water rating as well, but it's not as water resistant as the RS. I've heard of people having failures with the lights and the horns, or the lights turn on by themselves after riding in the rain. Also, one thing I've got to mention is that when you're riding and you see all this mud on the front, there's steering bearings in this tube, and if you get grit and water in this little crack here above the controller compartment and the steering column, the water and the grit will soak down into the bearings and it'll leave little notches in your steering. So I've got a couple steering notches. I need to replace the bearings on this thing, and it's because Kaabo isn't, or they weren't at least, using enough grease to grease the steering bearings to keep all the grit out. So I've been in contact with Kaabo, and they've assured me that they're going to be using more grease in the future, but I don't know if I can trust them or not. So if you want to make this thing completely off-road worthy, like for riding in the mud, one of the things you can and should do is take the steering bearings out and pack them with your own marine grease and put them back in to keep the grit and debris out. All right, let's talk about the suspension. The suspension on the GTR is hands down better. It's more plush. It's more or less maintenance free. It's a really easy design. The front, you literally don't have to do anything to. It's just got motorcycle style shocks in the front here. And I've never had any issues with these. When they compress, they go pshh. They're really nice. You can adjust the compression of the shocks, like how hard they are to actually push down with this little dial right here. On the RS, we have got these spring and hydraulic style shocks with a little rebound knob here. So you can't adjust the compression as easily. You can adjust the preload though with this little star nut at the bottom right here. You can screw or unscrew this thing to adjust your preload. I feel like the travel though is shorter than the front travel on the GTR. And like I said, they're generally just not as plush, but it's because it's a street wheel. Like, you want tighter suspension when you're riding on the streets for taking corners. If you look at any track car, the suspension is always really stiff. And if you look at any off-road vehicle, they're always really bouncy, and that's for off-road terrain, obviously. The GTR has the motorcycle style on the front, and then it has the spring and hydraulic suspension in the back. So does this. This has the same coil that it has on the front with the rebound knob and everything. I believe they're the same size shock, but it looks like the coils on this one might be thicker, and it's also caked in mud because the fenders on the GTR don't really do diddly. You might get some squeaking and creaking as the water gets up into the shock and the mud and stuff, so you might have to spray this off every once in a while and put some lube on it or something, but I generally don't. For those of you who don't know, the rebound knob on the suspension for the rear and then both of these springs, it adjusts how fast the spring comes back to full height. So if you have the rebound on slow, you'll hit a bump and it'll compress and then it'll come up really slowly. And that's great for street riding. If you have it on fast, it'll be extra springy because it'll just bounce back to full at full speed. So all in all, these are both very high quality, very nice scooters, both sold by VoroMotors.com. But this thing is definitely more aimed towards hardcore off-road riding. It's got the more plush suspension. It's got rippy acceleration. It's got the traction control. This thing though is much more pleasant to ride on the streets, just the general ride feel of it. And it's got the adjustable bars. It's got a much more comfortable, wider deck. Also very powerful though, but this thing, I named it the Street Princess. So if you're looking for more of an off-road hardcore ride, go for the GTR. Keep in mind that you might have to grease the steering bearings, and I'll put a video out on that later. With the RS though, it's pretty much perfect out of the box. It's very easy to ride on the street. They're both very comfortable, but I do like the overall ride feel of the RS a little more. I've got discount links and codes for you to get these scooters if you want to buy them from Voro Motors down in the description of this video. I do think that the GTR is a little cheaper. I've got a $300 off code for that one, and they're both around the $4,000 range. If you can find them for $37 or $35, that's a steal, I would would grab it. I think this GTR was on sale for 4th of July, so they do go on sale every once in a while, but as they stand right now, they're between like $38,000 and $4,000. So I hope that helps a lot of people. Stop getting questions, which one should I buy? You can make the decision for yourself. They're both very nice scooters. They do have their little ins and outs and quirks. This thing will be more oriented towards street riding. This thing will be your off-road hardcore machine, and the brutal acceleration with the turbo mode in sport. Okay, it's getting really hot outside. I think I did a pretty good job explaining the differences between the two scooters. I've got links and coupon codes down in the description if you want to purchase either of them. I hope you have fun riding your RS or your GTR. Post some videos and I can watch them. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.